Alright guys, back with a new video. This video is going to be a complete install using the kit. So I'm going to take it out of the box. I'm going to lay it all out for you, show you everything that's included, and then I'm going to do an install for you. So if you were to purchase a kit from me, this would be what you would receive, and then this would be what would be required to install it. I'm going to give you guys a list of tools, try to show you the tools that I use. So hopefully this will be beneficial if you buy a kit from me. This will kind of be like your how-to, your guide, or your instructions. I'm constantly updating little things with the kits. You know, I may find something that works a little bit better. Pretty much every install that I do, I learn a little something more, how I can make it a little bit better. So over time, the certain parts and pieces may change little by little, but for the most part, same concept. If you wind up with something a little bit different in your kit, then you know, there's a reason for that. Just something might be a little bit easier or something better to use. So right now I'm going to show you guys the tools that I use, so at least you're prepared, and so if you buy a kit, you know what to expect and what tools to have on hand before you get started. All right, let's do it. All right guys, so I'm going to give you a rundown on the tools you may need to get everything installed. This is primarily everything that I use. Obviously you're going to need a drill and some kind of something for screws. You'll need something to be able to cut the kayak for the PWM controls to slide in. Rubber mallet so we can get our well nuts put in. You'll need a socket for getting the bolts put in. It's 13 millimeters, so that'll fit our bolts to put the mount on. So blue tape is always good. Definitely need a tape measure, Sharpie, a lighter for our heat shrink, a pair of scissors to a couple things we got to cut, some heat shrink, paracord, whatnot, razor cutter. These are the drill bits that we'll need. So, I mean, normally everybody just gets a drill bit set, so, but these are the exact sizes you would need, along with a good step bit and a little poker. So this is great for being able to mark your holes. And then a swagging tool, which you can pick up at Home Depot, and that is to crush the ferrule stops for the foot pegs. You can get away with just using something more like some vice grips. The most important part is already crimped for you in the kit. So really the only thing you got to crimp is just two little small ones just to hold the cable in the foot peg. So you can get away with just about anything to crimp that one, even like a good wire crimper. And the last thing is probably the most important thing, and that is a good coat hanger. So that's primarily everything you would need, and hopefully you have that stuff laying around. And don't forget some W. All right guys, so the first thing we're going to do is show you what comes in the kit. So when you buy a kit from me, it's going to come in this box here, and it's going to come, everything's going to be pre-packaged. So you're going to have your tilt stuff, your stuff for your steering, this will be our PWM panel, our mount. This is the prop that the motor comes with, and our motor. So everything's going to come already assembled for you. It's just a matter of getting this stuff put on the kayak. set that aside for right now. And just going to show you guys real quick. It's the prop. Here's our motor mount. So you'll see most of the stuff is already halfway assembled, and that's just so that you guys know where everything's going to go from the get-go. So just pay close attention when you're unboxing how things are. You don't need to take the stuff apart until you actually get ready to do the install. So that's what the mount's going to look like. PWM panel. Alright, so you're going to notice on the PWM panel that I've changed it a little bit from the way I did them in the past. It's going to come with 3M tape for mounting, and it's also going to come with the foam tape for mounting. So depending on the contour of your kayak, I'm finding out that a lot of the kayaks are shaped a little bit differently, I guess because of the mold. But if this ends up not fitting, or you don't feel confident in this sealing everything up, you can stick this foam tape right to your 3M tape and still get a nice good seal. This stuff is a little bit thinner than the stuff I used in the past, and at the same time it's actually a lot more rigid than the stuff I used in the past, a lot less flex. So you may have to end up using the foam tape, so that's why it's in there. But that's completely up to you. It kind of also depends on what kind of conditions you're in. I'm a lake guy, so I don't have to worry about water so much, but if you're a saltwater guy, you may have to take a little bit more care in sealing that up. So our foot steering is going to come with our cables that we need for the foot pegs. It's going to come with the hoses that we need to run up to the front to the back. And it's going to come with all your screws, some heat shrink, everything that you need to attach all of this and secure it and get it functioning. So you'll get a little bag with all these little goodies. And then for our tilt, that's the hose that we run from the mount, and this goes up front next to the seat. You get your paracord to do the tilt. You're going to have your spring clip to attach to the motor. And then you'll get another bag of little goodies. That's your pulley, your clam cleat, some heat shrink, screws to hold everything together. Alright, so that's everything that's in the kit. It's about everything I could think of to put in it that you would need, and you should be covered. So we got our tools, we got all our pieces. Now we're fixing to jump in on our install. Alright guys, so one word of advice: when you get your kit and you get everything unboxed or unbagged and you're going through everything, go ahead before you really start the install, take the time to cut those zip ties and let that stuff relax a little bit, because the cable, the wiring, that's not really a big deal, but the actual hoses, they're plastic, so they will take up a kind of a round shape, and you're not going to want them to be round when you install them. So the flatter you can get them, the better. If you live in a sunny area, you know, it wouldn't even be a bad idea to stick them out in the sun for a little while and have those things warm up, and that'll help let the plastic get rid of that round shape. The install will take about, I mean, depending on your experience and whatnot, it takes me about 2.5 hours to do a full install. So you may be 2.5, you may be 5, you may be 6 or 8, but.
I have a package for you.
All right, so like I was saying before I was interrupted by the mail lady. Go ahead and take all them zip ties off, and even if you can lay them out on the ground somewhere, maybe with some weights on both sides, it will help you out when you start to install these. You're not having to untangle that inside the kayak We're just trying to get them as flat as possible and get rid of that round form. So I'm just gonna lay these out right now and get them flat. All right guys, so to save us some time on the video, I've already taped off, used my blue tape, taped off where I want my PWM panel to go. PWM panel is where I usually like to start. It's the biggest hole that we got to cut, and it is also going to provide us access for other things down the road. So one day I may include a template for the PWM, but for now, just measure it out. It's about 5 inches, and because these are kind of custom made, you may get one that's you know, it's anywhere from 2 1/4 to 2.5 inches. So I've already got that marked out. Word of advice: it is a whole lot easier to make a small hole big than it is to make a big hole small. So start small, work your way up. That way you're not having to repair something. In the future, I'm thinking about reconfiguring these panels just so that the buttons are going to be laid out a little bit different, and it will give us a little bit more room to be able to mount and have everything seal up good. So that's where I like to start. PWM panel, like you've seen in my last videos, I'm going to use a step bit, and I'm going to drill these corners first. What that rounded part will do is keep it from splitting or cracking down the road. So with it being round, it's just that's just kind of a tip for you guys. So I'm going to start with those 4 holes, and then I'm going to cut this out with my multi-tool, and then that'll give us access to start running the battery cable. This stuff drills like butter, so just take it easy. Alright guys, so like I said, start with a smaller hole and work your way bigger till everything clears. So right here you can see we got a good nice tight fit. Had to notch it out for the knob and the controls, but that leaves us with enough overlap so that once we screw this thing down, we will have a good amount of space on the sides. So hopefully that will make it pretty watertight in there. Then also guys, I would hold off on installing this permanently. That's usually pretty much the last thing that I do. Unfortunately, the PWMs, they come from China, so they're not 100% totally reliable. So after I get done with everything, I test all that, make sure it all works before I actually secure it, screw it all down, and put the 3M to it. So I'm just going to hold off before I secure that. The next thing we're going to do is work on our battery cable. So we're just going to get that from front to the PWM panel. So it's going to come with this grommet right here. It's already going to be zip tied to your battery cable, and that's just so that you know what it's for when you get it. All your connections are already going to be made. So from the front of the boat, you're going to have your leads for your battery. You're going to have a quick connect so you can disconnect it. You can leave this permanently attached to your battery. And then we're going to route this through the kayak. And you've already got your leads for your PWM. Red is for the positive. So right now we're going to go up front and drill a hole for this using our step bit. I tried to drill it up kind of high so water can't get in there. And right in this corner will give you a straight shot all the way to the PWM. Alright, so our hole is right at the 3/4 mark. We're going to take our clothes hanger, a little bit of electrical tape. Make sure it's nice and straight. point it at our PWM access hole that we made. Just give it a little push. And then it should be right down inside this hole. And that kind of lets you know about how much slack you need. We're just going to take our grommet. Grommet opens up. Slide it over. And push it in. And I'll go ahead and mention it just like I mention it all the time. Anything that you cut out of the kayak, throw it in a Ziploc bag, save it. You can use it later to patch holes, any kind of problems, anything that you need it for. So just save all of your shavings and anything that you cut out. All right, guys, so this thing's going to come to you with all the well nuts, the handle nuts, all that's already on it. So the first thing we're going to do when installing the mount is we're going to go ahead and take this stuff here apart. So just a Phillips head screw to remove the wiring. And you're going to have a grommet on there that you'll see later on where we're going to put that, so don't lose that grommet. And then all the well nuts, you can kind of keep track of what goes where. These are going to be your 2 handle nuts, so don't confuse them. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is remove the existing handle. And just put it off to the side for now. And we're going to line up our mount. There is nothing straight on the back of these boats, so there's not a whole lot to measure to figure out how straight you are. You can try using these to get you into a good idea of where you're at, but honestly it's more a lot of eyeballing and just making sure everything looks symmetrical. It's not going to matter either way if it's off a little bit here or there. It's not going to steer any different or anything like that. And then in the back, I try to just come off the back of the kayak a little bit so there's not any vibrations back there. But right there, we look pretty symmetrical. Everything looks pretty lined up. And then we're just going to take our Sharpie, mark our mounting holes. And then you're going to have one hole here for your tilt. Which is going to be in the center of that hole for your handle. And then you're going to have a hole here for your wiring. So the hole for the wiring, I just move it over here. It doesn't need to be anything too lined up. And our hole for our tilt comes in at an angle so that it will meet up with the motor. So I try to do that as far forward as I can and centered in that hole right there. And then that way that'll give us a little bit of tilt to push back with it. When we drill this hole, we're going to drill it at an angle. So you'll see whenever we start putting our tilt hose down in there with the tilt connector on it, we want it at an angle so that it's a straight shot right to the motor. All right, so one of the most important parts of this install is getting these well nuts correct. And the best way that I have found to do that is using a step bit. You can see right there where I've got that actually marked with a Sharpie on my bit, so I know how far to go, and I do not want to go past that. One of the key parts of a well nut is its ability to expand, but you don't want that hole so big that when it expands it still has room to come out. So I've got a little process that I use that so far has done me pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you real quick. When I drill this hole, I'm going to go right to my line. And I'm just going to go real slow with it. And then when I put this well nut in that hole, because it is a step bit, it's got a little ledge in there. So the well nut is going to sit on that ledge, but it's not going to go down until I hit it with a hammer. So right in there, hopefully that focuses for you, but there's a little ledge in there. And what that does is that makes that well nut extremely tight. It makes it almost impossible for it to actually come out. And this stuff drills like butter, so you want to be careful. Alright, so you can see we got our 6 holes for our mounting. You see those little ledges in there, hopefully. So now we're going to take our well nut. See how it sits in there, but I can't push it in. Now we're going to force it in. And all it should take is a couple of whacks with a hammer. And that well nut is never coming out. And now we're going to drill a 3/8 hole for our wiring grommet. And for that we're just going to use our 3/8 drill bit. So nothing too technical or serious going on there. And then for our tilt we're going to use a 1/2 inch drill bit. Like I said earlier, drill it at an angle. You can start going straight so you make sure it doesn't slip, but then you're going to want it to go at an angle. So before we actually mount the mount, we want to get our tilt hose down in there, and we want to get our wiring in there. Alright, so in my past videos I usually bring my tilt out down here, but what I'm starting to do now is bring my tilt out right here. It's a little bit higher up, and I feel like it gives you a little bit better pull on the tilt. It's how I originally did my kayak, which was the very first one that I did. Since then I changed it to go down low, but now I'm changing it to go back up high. And I feel like it makes a real big difference in how easy it is to do that tilt. Plus the hole's up higher, so you don't have to worry about water going in. So I've got the tilt hose laid out right now, kind of letting it flatten out. The diameter on this stuff is 3/8, so we're going to use a 3/8 drill bit. we're gonna drill in there, and then that'll bring our tilt hose out right here. Alright guys, so we let the tilt kind of sit out as much as we could. All we're going to do is feed this in. Try to direct it over to that side of the kayak. See if we get lucky. Sometimes we can get lucky and just grab it from the hole there. And we want to try to maintain that straightness as much as we can. So that looks pretty good right there. The next thing we're going to do is take our coat hanger and we're going to feed it in. We're going to leave those little kinks in it because that will help actually grab that wire. On this side, I'm just going to bend it so we got less chance of losing it once we stick it in there. Just going to stick that in to the hole, grab it from this side, and then we're going to take our tilt hose. Your side over here is never going to go past that point, so you don't have to worry about that side. We're just going to take our tilt and start feeding it up on that clothes hanger as far up as we can go. Alright guys, so hopefully you can see that. Try to get some light in there for you, but we're gonna pull our clothes hanger and then apply some pressure with our other side there, and you see how it comes through pretty easy. And then as we pull, we just kind of want to feel for this thing and make sure that it's not too tight, and also at the same time make sure that there's no kinks in it. Just going to stick your hand inside, make sure that it feels tight and straight. And if you need to straighten it out, what you do is you just twist this side of it and you'll feel it kind of pop. When it pops, that means that that thing is should be straightening out. You want it as straight as possible with no kinks, obviously for pulling purposes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to secure it here and here. So we're going to cut off, no, I wouldn't cut off all the excess yet, but we're going to put our clamps here with a piece of heat shrink, and that heat shrink will help hold those clamps on super tight. In the back, we just want to make sure that we don't want to be super tight, but we don't want to be super loose. So just about maybe an inch worth of play. All right guys, we got our tilt going down to the cockpit. So the next thing we're gonna do is get our wires going down to the cockpit, and that is so that we can secure the mount. So first thing we're gonna do, we've already got our 3/8 hole drilled. We're just gonna line these up so that they'll make it down that hole pretty easy. You can get lucky sometimes to just push this wire this way, but that doesn't always happen. So easiest thing to do is use our good old trusty coat hanger again. And we're just going to push this up front, give it a little bend as it goes in. You want to make sure you're pushing it at that angle right there. You always want to make sure that we're going around these scupper holes, because these scupper holes go from top to bottom. So inside the kayak there's a post. You want to make sure you're always going around them, you know, especially with that tilt, because if your tilt goes that way and then that way, it's probably not going to work too good. All right, so I've grabbed my coat hanger. And get this in through real good. And then I'm going to push that coat hanger up to where the PWM panel is at. And then we pull it on through. And what you can do in the meantime is just stick this down in here to make sure that it doesn't fall back in the hole. You can pretty much just let it fall in there because you can grab that stuff real easy later on. So next thing we're going to do is get our grommet on here. Now to make this grommet fit, we just need to trim one of these edges off with your scissors. We're going to slide it over the wire. Probably leave about 2.5 to 3 inches exposed. And then we're just going to take a flathead screwdriver and push that grommet in around the bottom of the edges. And that should give you a pretty good seal. And the next thing we can do is we can attach our wires, we can set our mount on, and get that all bolted down. So on the bottom of the plate should be pretty obvious. I got a red and we got a red wire, so we're just going to connect those. And push our slack down. And I usually leave about a few inches there of play. The next thing we're gonna do is put our bolts in. Now one thing I'll mention is what I've been seeing on some of these 120s is the molds are slightly different, especially in this rear a little bit. Some of them are more flatter, some of them have a little bit of a angle to them. You can put some washers on the back or on the front of this mount to kick the back down a little bit more if you need to. I haven't seen that on all of them, but on some of them I have. So I'm guessing when they pull it out of the mold and they let it sit, something's going on back here that it causes that hump to not be as big on all of them as it is on some. When you tighten up these well nuts, you do not want to over tighten them. because you can pull them through. It's just plastic, so I don't get crazy when I'm tightening them up. I'll snug them up with this. And then I'll just hand tighten them the rest of the way. And but the reason for 6 bolts is so that you don't have to get all crazy and get those things super tight. The more we can displace that weight, the better, and the more fasteners we have, the better, because then we're not relying on, we got a lot more places to grab, and we're not relying on 1 or 2 places to grab. Therefore, kind of forcing you to really crank down on them, because we don't want to do that with this plastic. So next thing we're going to do is put our handle back on. So this is a stock handle you pulled off earlier. We're going to put that plastic washer in that came with the handle, and then we're going to use our new nut, our new bolt. Washer, washer, and nut. Just add a crescent wrench to the list of tools. That's it, we're good with our handle. Alright guys, so I cut off the excess, and we just want to make sure, just reach inside real quick, make sure you don't have any kinks or anything, make sure everything feels like a pretty straight pull. First thing we're going to do is start with your cable clamps. This does take some adjustment, so right now we're just going to get our cable clamps in a spot. It's a permanent spot, but we're going to add heat shrink to this tube later on once we get all the adjustments done. That will really hold this thing in place real good. We want our hose to come out right at the corner of that handle. And this doesn't interfere with the handle at all. It's a good spot because it's kind of hidden and it's away from everything. Alright, so that looks good. Next thing we want to do is find our spot for our pulley. So what the pulley does is it redirects that paracord that's going to do the tilt. It redirects it up at the pilot. One thing you want to check for is just make sure that you've got room with your seat. Depending on which position you use. I set all these up to use either position so that it's not in the way either way. So right there, The seat should not interfere. And then we're going to take our poker and just mark our spots. Then we're going to use our 5/16 drill bit. Alright, so once we got our 5/16 holes, we should be able to put these well nuts in. If you ever have trouble getting a well nut in, just use whatever screw is intended for it and use that to help push it in. This is a 5/16 hole and you want it to be tight. Don't wiggle the drill bit in there too hard and water that hole out. So now we're just going to put our pulley on. We're going to adjust all this later, so we don't need to worry about that too much right this second. So next is going to be our clam cleat. So our cable is going to come around this pulley and we want it to be angled backwards towards the pilot. So I found right about there is a good spot for it. And it kind of, there's almost a flat spot right there that matches. So we're going to do the same thing with this. Just mark our spots. Drill our 5/16 holes. And same thing. Make sure the clam cleat opens up this way. These well nuts are a lot smaller than the ones in the back, so just take a lot of care. Don't over tighten them. I like to just get all the slack out of them with a impact, but I'll come back later with a screwdriver so I can really feel how tight they are. So now we're just going to trim this down a little bit for now so we can get it to stop at that pulley. Next thing we're going to do is put our cable in the rear and push it to the front. And I like to put a little bit of WD-40 down that tube that will help it pull real good. So I'm just going to put a little WD-40 down there, a couple squeezes. I'm going to take our tilt cable, spring hook is going to be in the back. And if we don't have any kinks in this thing, it should push right through, right up front, nice and easy. Alright, so we got that fed through. Just going to feed it around that pulley, up through the clam cleat. And then we're going to put our motor on the rear and start testing to see, make sure everything lines up. Make sure everything is pulling correctly. And then we'll cut down any kind of excess that we can to trim everything down. So right now we're just going to do more or less a weight test. Getting our motor on. Connect our clip. And then we're just going to give it a couple pulls. So let me show you why we do that. So with those couple of pulls, you can see how it pulled the hose out a little bit. So that's where we want to make our trim, right there. And then we can put our heat shrink on and clamp these down for good. And then that's it. We just put our handle on and we're done with the tilt. Alright, so you can see I got my clamps in, my heat shrink, my screws. Having some issues with the GoPro, it keeps stopping on me. Probably has something to do with the 100-degree heat in Florida right now. But so I got my handle on, and with it connected to the motor back there, what you want to do is just spin the motor. So that would be pretty much the most amount that you would need in the back. And then you're just going to come up front. And so we know we want our handle probably right about there, and we just want to take like a mental note of that. We're going to release the back, and that'll give us the slack up here to tie our knot for our handle. So right about, let's say right about here is where we want our knot. That should be good there. So yeah, that'll work right there. Motor up, motor down. All right, so now that our tilt is done, we're going to start on the foot pegs. So this particular kayak already had a rudder system installed, so it's going to be a little bit different. You might have to look at some of my older videos because this is pretty much the same. So with this one being a little bit different, the holes are already drilled. It's a 1/4-inch hole that we're going to run our hose through. The only real difference for us is the foot pegs are on these sliders. So the only real difference is just how we attach the foot peg. If we didn't have these sliders, we would attach right to the foot peg, remove these locks, and that would be our sliding. But since it has these sliders, we're going to utilize them. We're going to connect our cable to this part of it, and it's going to slide in this track, which is kind of nice because it will still give you the ability to adjust the foot pegs. So that's kind of one thing that's nice about the that rudder system, I guess. I don't know if that's a perception rudder system or if that's something aftermarket, but so to get our, I like to start in the front and work my way back. So I'm going to use our trusty coat hanger, and I like to use the where it's got those coils in it from being coiled up as a coat hanger, and then it doesn't come off real easy. So you don't have to wrap any tape or anything like that, because if you did that, then it's harder to get through this hole. So all I'm going to do is feed it from front to back. I'm going to feed it to my hatch location, going around that scupper. Should be back there now. Going around that scupper. So I'm just going to pull it out of the hatch for now. So I'm going to pull it off of there. And then these holes were already drilled because of that rudder system, but once again, it's a 1/4 inch hole, and I'm going to do the same thing from this side, but I'm just going to give this side a little bend so it doesn't fall all the way in that hole. Make sure we go around the scupper. This might be a little tight to grab. But we are around that scupper. And we just want to push this up onto our coat hanger. And that's all we got to do. So on each end, I like to do a piece of heat shrink, just barely covering that brass so that we know that that's never going to come out. On most of them, I do 2 connectors, but for these, because they have the slides, I'll probably just do 1 connector, piece of heat shrink, and that one cable clamp over the heat shrink. So now on this side, we don't want to pull it too tight. We want to leave it a little bit of slack, and then we're just going to cut off our excess. Put our brass connector in there, and then heat shrink the end of it. And now we'll get that other side done real quick, and then we'll put the cables in. Alright guys, so when I ship the cables, they're already going to be crimped on one end. And on the other end, I've just got this piece of heat shrink over it just to keep it from getting all frayed up during shipping or when you pull it out of the bag and whatnot. So this will get cut off or removed. So you can discard that. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it. On the rudder system, I just drilled a hole and I came out on the back side of this little cavity. I'm going to push my cable through, put my ferrule stop on there, crimp it down, check out the adjustments, and that's pretty much it. If you're doing without the rudder system, which I would imagine most guys are, you're just going to come through the back. You might be able to see it up there if you can see that, but you're going to come through the back of the pedal and just put your ferrule stop there. So there's not really much difference. And then the only other thing we got left to do is we'll throw that PWM controller in, and then we'll fire everything up and get it tested. Alright guys, so we got the foot controls all done. Nice and smooth. I really like those. Really like those tracks that came with that rudder kit. probably will make for a little bit smoother steering, and they got bigger pedals. Might actually look into something like that for my personal kayak. But got the PWM installed, so you'll see on the kit I mark it plain as day what the battery and the motor is, since I don't think any of my customers probably reads Chinese. But so I go ahead and I mark it for you. I mark it there, and I mark it on the back, so it's extremely clear as to what goes where. So if you're familiar with PWMs, you probably already know this, but so you got a forward, stop, and reverse, and then this is your speed. So right now that's off. I'm going to put it in forward, and then as I click it on and increase the speed little by little, you can see how slow I can make it go. And then that would be max speed, off, and reverse. And then down. All right, guys, so that is it. I believe I went over everything as much as I could in detail. Only thing I've got left to do is to secure this panel and get that panel put in and screw it down. And then the customer, all they got to do is provide a battery box and a battery. They've got their connections. Tilt is all good. That's the new location, new setup for the tilts that I'm going to start doing. A little bit different than the old stuff, and it seems to work a little bit smoother, so I think it's worth it. And that's the rear. That's everything mounted, tilt, motor. And just to show you guys how easy the motor is to take off, you're gonna undo your electric, undo your tilt, undo your foot pegs, and then that's it. Just pull that pin and the motor comes out, and then you can transport. Two things to note is, if you go with this setup, do know that you cannot tilt the motor with your feet on the pedals, because then you're just fighting yourself. So it's kind of common knowledge or common sense, but it's also something that you can easily forget or not think about. So if you're throwing the motor into tilt, you're coming into shore, take your feet off the pedals, then pull your cord to tilt. Second thing is, when you first get going in the morning, you get everything out of the truck, you throw everything on the kayak, and you're getting ready to go. You're down there, you put the motor on. You got to make sure that you put a little bit of tension on these cables. First thing when you get in, you get everything set up. Just hit your pedals and grab the slack out of them. Otherwise, you're going to get out there on the water, and one of these are going to pop off on you, and then you're going to have to come back into shore and hook it back up. But so far, those are the only two notes that I would have for you, or suggestions. Other than that, it's just fun. It's easy to use. It's smooth, and I like it a lot. All right, guys, just wanted to show you that's the PWM installed. I ended up adding 2 screws there to get that thing to fit those curves better. So if you've received a kit from me recently, you may have to add 2 more screws there. I'm going to work on trying to make those panels fit a little bit better with less work, but that's what it looks like. Everything's working. Just wanted to mention to you guys real quick, if you're interested in getting a kit, you can email me at HammerheadKayaking@gmail.com. I do PayPal. Kits are $5.75 plus $65 for shipping. If you are in Central Florida or want to come to Central Florida, I'm in Mulberry, which is borders Lakeland, Bartow, and Valrico, Brandon. So if you're anywhere close to that area, you can actually bring it to me, and I will do the actual install for $750. So you drop it off with me, you pick it up, you're done. The only thing you have to provide is a battery. So just send me an email, hammerheadkayaking@gmail.com, and we'll work out the details, whatever you guys want. So, all right. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.